Came out blazing in that first set. And then what happened in that second set? Did he make an adjustment?
I mean, Rinky's always going to compete well, so that was no surprise. I've started to misfire a few errors on the forehand, started to come in bunches. I think I just started to kind of gauge my spacing on a lot of the balls. He was doing a good job of putting a lot of returns in the court, kind of floating them high and deep. And on clay, bounces aren't the most consistent, so it kind of felt into a little bit of a hard court reflex of just trying to catch a lot of those balls on the rise. And once the arrow started to flow, naturally tension starts to build and you don't think as clearly. So I had a flurry of errors, definitely off the forehand side. It cost me the first break, got it back on serve. My serve started to kind of let me down a little bit, but I felt like I would regain the rhythm. Ball started to get a bit old. We started to get some new balls. I started to get a little bit of juice. So I felt pretty good going into the third, and I think I came out pretty strong there.
Yeah. Chris Miles, served on Sports Illustrated. Congrats on the win. Mm-hmm. The last time you played Rinky, you actually lost him at this same tournament in Houston. How much was Ben Shelton's popular daddy comment maybe going through your mind to try to get the W tonight?
None at all. Not at all. Didn't even think about it in the least. It was more so just wanting to – there's not too many chances. You get a second chance against an opponent at the same tournament on the same court, especially in my home country. So more so the motivation was to kind of see how much I progressed, I would say, on clay. Last year was definitely certainly the first time going through an entire clay court swing. I had never played on clay that much in my life, so I felt by the end of the clay court season I was starting to feel a bit confident, and then things changed pretty quickly over to grass and hard the rest of the year. But just for some reason the past couple of days I've started to feel really comfortable on the clay. It's the first time I can honestly say that. So I felt good in practices. I've had some great practices coming into my first round, so I'm like, I think this feels good. I think this is something different than last year, and I was able to come out there and have a different result than last year. So I definitely think that I'm starting to solidify my or get a bit more comfortable on the dirt. But no, Ben's daddy comment didn't pop in my mind. Honestly, I played second time I lost to Rinky Australian Open qualies some years ago. I lost. Have I played him any other times?
Not to my research.
AO qualies in Doha. And then last year, so I certainly wanted to get a win, but wasn't really thinking about Rinky being my daddy.
Why do you think so many American men, I feel like for the last several generations, have been averse to clay? And what changes have you made? Any tangible changes in practice that have made a big difference the last few weeks or days?
I think you ask different players, you might get different answers. Personally, I just think when you grow up playing on hard court your entire life, your game style kind of gets tailored to that surface. And I think it's the same across the world. If you were to look at Germans and Russians are great ball strikers, fast courts, they love to pocket the ball. Like Argentinians, Spaniards, they have different game styles, but if you grow up on the clay, you typically play a bit heavier. So I think for a number of years, a lot of Americans, our game styles have been predicated on serve, first ball, forehands, playing aggressive. On the clay, you don't get as much of a reward on some of those first ball forehands if you go pretty flat. And I think that's kind of been the thing that I've struggled with in the past. You have to be able to play with a bit more spin, a bit more rotation. That's why you've seen some of the Americans who've done well on it, Jack Sock, Steve Johnson, forehands, or they're still playing first ball forehand tennis, but the forehand has a lot more work, a lot more spin, and it's tougher to deal with. And the movement, I think that's the other thing. There are little nuances to clay, mainly defending out of the corners, being able to scrap and claw and float 3 feet from the baseline with a continental grip. A lot of those guys from other parts of the world have been doing that since they were 12 years old, and they're just pretty good at it, obviously, for years and years of repetition. Americans, for the most part, especially for me, at least growing up in Atlanta, I played on hard court my entire life. My first clay court match was 2018 Roland Garros. My life. So there's certainly some adjustments that have to be made, and I think now the younger generation of Americans are a lot more comfortable in clay. I think we've seen the success that Fritz had last year on the dirt. Francis has won here before. He's very comfortable on the dirt. He has great feel and great athleticism. So I think the younger group of Americans they kind of like the clay. Tommy is a junior French Open champion. So yeah, I think it's slowly starting to shift. I just think for years we were serve, first ball, forehand, big shots, hoping they don't come back. And now when they start to come back, you're like, whoa, I got to try to figure something out.
You talk about your mindset going into the third set, what the game plan was?
No, not really. Well, I mean, it wasn't that much of a difference. It was more so just clean up some of the errors I had in the second. Nothing really changed. I felt like the first set felt like how I had been practicing in the previous days. Felt like I've been making a lot of returns. I've been playing with a bit more shape, and things started to come together. When you start to feel a bit of tension, especially in what's been a bit of a tough year, your mind starts to get a bit cloudy. So you start to kind of go to muscle memory. Ball sits there, I'm going to crank it. You start to misfire on one, you start to rush a little bit. So I felt like I just had a bit of a mental kind of cloudy judgment in the second. Going into the third, I was like, hey, let's just get back to what we've been doing on the practice court, get back to what we did in the first set, and hopefully things will take care of itself.
Chris, speaking about that third set, I noticed you, or the camera caught you grinning and making a motion to your box when you held to go up 5-2. I was wondering what that was about, if you can remember, and then also, what is it like working with your coach? I believe it's a new partnership that started this year?
No, so, so the hold it to go up 5-2, I mean, that point was just because I had to say break point. Oftentimes when you break, you find yourself getting broken or having a tough service game that next game. So having to face break point, come up with some good serves, and that's just kind of wasn't necessarily anything too specific to him. It was just kind of firing myself up, getting some energy going. As for the coaching setup, Philip Gress, who's here with me, works alongside Chris Eaton, who's not here, but they are in constant correspondence. Chris was the associate head coach at Wake Forest for a number of years, coached Rajiv Ram and John Pierce as well on tour. And Phil has actually traveled with me before. He traveled with me from, I believe, June of 2020 all the way up until July 2021. Or 2022 actually. So we were college teammates. He's seen me from college. He's seen my game kind of progress through the years. Even when he was in college, he would come with me to some tournaments. So he knows me better than probably most people. So it's nice to have that sense of familiarity, to have him back, but also to be under the guidance of Chris, who's I've really thoroughly enjoyed working with him. He's bringing some new things to my game, and it's taking a bit of time to start to get comfortable with. But I truly feel like I'm on the right direction.
What's one tangible thing, going back to the clay court improvements we talked about, what do you feel like is like one tangible thing that you saw in the match tonight that you've been working on in practice and were able to apply in your win tonight?
Being a bit more patient on the forehand and playing with a bit more shape. I think that's kind of the biggest thing. I love getting, forehands with my feet set and really going after it, going through it and cranking it. But on the clay, you just don't get as much reward, and the risks a lot of times will outweigh the reward. You start to spray balls like I did in the second set. The matches can get away from you quickly. So I was pretty pleased with how patient I was, playing with a bit more height, slowing the pace of shot down, and being okay with having to work the point a little bit more.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome. Congrats.
Good luck.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys.